welcome to our 21 days of data advent calendar-esque, getting our citadel ready to defend ourselves for Proof of Keys Day extraordinaire. I really appreciate you joining and talking a little bit about the dashboard. I said this earlier, but if you say the word dashboard in Bitcoin, I think you immediately have to follow that up with the words Clark Moody. And in fact, you've been around for quite a long time. In fact, the first article on Bitcoin Magazine, I don't know if you know this, is August 3rd, 2013. It was written by Vitalik, and it was talking about not accepting gambling on your websites. Right? That was it. Right? That was a big thing with Satoshi Dice in particular in this article back then. Anyways, so give me a little bit of background. I mean, look, 2013, that's been around for a while. And I know you worked on a multitude of different projects. Can you give us a little bit of a history there?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, happy Bitcoin Advent to you and yours.
Thank you.
May your keys ever be safe. Right? Yeah, so I first looked at Bitcoin in 2011 through happenstance, through a lab mate running the software in my research lab in grad school. And I just read the white paper, went down the rabbit hole, and started building market data websites. So Mt. Gox had free data. And so I put together a Mt. Gox order book, chart, time and sales page and launched in June 2011. So I got to watch the Mt. Gox hack from 30 to 1 on my site. So it sat there and just read for 10 minutes straight. So that was kind of my intro to this whole thing, was just like, everything's crazy. And then, yeah, I've had a couple acquisitions through my time in Bitcoin. I built a website for trading Bitcoin through the web with like a unified interface across multiple exchanges. And that was acquired by Blockchain in 2014. And then in 2017, I co-founded with Dan Held and Matt Galligan Interchange, which is a kind of back office reconciliation tool for institutional players. And that was acquired by Kraken last summer. And so, yeah, a couple acquisitions, a couple different projects in there. It's been a wild ride, an unlimited bucket of popcorn this whole time.
That's awesome. About how much time do you get to spend actually working on the dashboard? Right? I know you're always implementing new things and adding some new stuff. Like, is that your baby that you get to spend just a little bit of time on, or is it something that you actually feel like you get to sink your teeth in and enjoy on a frequent basis?
Through the spring, I was really ramping it up, and it was maybe an hour or two, a couple nights a week kind of thing. And every stage of, there's always that stage in a programming project where you make big chunks really fast. Mm-hmm. And then there's like the last little details that take a long, long time. And so I've kind of been backburnering a highly accurate supply number. So my supply that I'm reporting on the dashboard is about 110 Bitcoin high, because I'm not currently factoring in miners that don't claim the fees. Right. Which about 1,100 blocks don't claim the fees. And so I'm in the process of refactoring and rescanning the chain and all this stuff to launch that. And it's just, it's one of those things that to get it right, it's a pretty serious amount of work. And so it's slow going.
It's that last 0.5%, right?
The last,
of the work.
Yeah. Well, the first 90% of a project takes 90% of the time, and the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the time.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I can identify with that pretty frequently. Every time I sit down to write code now, it feels like I'm never going to finish anything. But part of this Advent thing means that I have to finish stuff. So I've been really excited by pushing ourselves to get something done here. With this dashboard, I mean, who is it really being built for? Like, what is like the goal of putting it out there in the first place?
So the inception of the idea was around the block wars, the fork wars, 2017. All summer in 2017, you're going to 4 or 5 different websites to look at one number per site, And you're looking at miner signaling over here. You're looking at the UASF node numbers
Mm-hmm.
on another site, all this stuff. And all you really care about is the one number. And some of the sites refresh automatically, others, you got to mash refresh to get it, all this stuff. And so it's just like, for my own personal edification, I just want every single number that I care about in all of Bitcoin on one screen, flashing and blinking, of course.
Of
And
course.
so, yeah, and so that was kind of the kernel of the idea, and I think I've accomplished that. There are obviously a lot more numbers we could look at, but it gives you a pretty good, solid overview of what's going on. So.
Yeah, and a lot of these numbers aren't just on chain either. You're having to do quite a bit of work or working with maybe third-party APIs or trusting some other people, or maybe the data is not even available, like Lightning node information, right?
Mhm.
Like you're only working with public information, right? You can't get like the full breadth of everything that's going on. I mean, what are some of the hurdles that you have to face, and like how do you kind of maybe look at the balance there of saying, all right, look, this is like you're talking about kind of the lost Bitcoin, like how much work it takes to get that. How do you balance that and saying, all right, this is just about as good enough as I can really do, and the information is very valuable, so I do need to put it out there, versus strictly saying, you know what, it's going to be confusing if I do this wrong, right? So I'm just going to skip it.
Yeah, the most obvious example of that for me is the node count.
Yep.
So I'm not running a scanner to go and try to find or listen for all of the nodes that I can, and so I'm just piping in the bitnodes IO node counter, and just reporting that, and so it gives you, 11,000 Bitcoin nodes, which is obviously low because that number's been
Yeah, that's what
pretty
I run in the
stable.
office. I'm pretty sure about 11,000 somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, it's just the back room, but it's that sort of thing where it's like, I just want to put something out there. I have notes on the dashboard with the data sources if it's not just coming from my own node. And it's like, it's important to see. You can check on the versions that are out there. How's the network upgrading to these things without having to visit that site? Um, and so I know that it's inaccurate, but it's better to have something on at least that data point. There are others that are really hard to get, but I think would be valuable that I haven't done, say UTXO set analysis. So how many addresses have more than one Bitcoin? How many addresses have more than 100 Bitcoin? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That requires analyzing the output set, which I don't have readily available. Or HODL waves, how much of the supply hasn't moved in a certain amount of time. Well, that's kind of an advanced metric that I haven't gotten. And then other ones, uh, most everything else should be pretty much exact, because most of the things on here are coming from a full node. The Lightning stats are coming from my Lightning node, so that's a view of my node into the Lightning network, which is pretty close to some of the public sites you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the stuff that's close enough, like maybe there may be some off by one stuff where the difficulty period, or like when you say how many blocks happened over the last year, if you just take a timestamp, you're going to hit between two blocks, and maybe there's one more, one less that happened. But for the most part, things are pretty much exact, I think.
Yeah, and like maybe like Taproot, like how would you think about like signaling some piece of data for that might be valuable? I know like we, in particular, Aaron Van Weerdum, one of our technical editor, has been talking about like just contacting the miners and saying, hey, what's your adoption look like, to see if we're going to run into any issues. How would you maybe contribute to help that out somehow?
Well, once signaling starts, then I'll parse the block versions and indicate in a little, soft forks box what that running percentage is, and then maybe some dates, date of activation once it happens, whatever, earliest date of activation, things like that. Right now, I can see that, on the mailing list, someone was trying to publish Taproot, Bec32 version 1 address
Mm-hmm.
scripts to the network. And I actually see on my dashboard right now, there's 3 transactions in the last 90 days, 3 outputs that are SegWit unknown version, and that's those outputs. They're not called Taproot yet because that's not in core yet, but I've got the other. I'll have the tap script output types or whatever listed when that goes live. So I kind of already see it here, but then block version stuff I don't have. I also don't have a block size thing, because I feel like everybody who cared about block size.
Look, there's still people who care about the block size very, very much, right? I think that hopefully that didn't come back up again. But that's very cool that you're already somewhat prepared, or at least you're able to highlight some of that's kind of happening a little prematurely, but still happening on the network. What else do you kind of look for in deciding a metric of some sort? Like, are you looking at, like, again, maybe what's generally accepted as far as like Bitcoiners really looking at stuff? Is it, would you ever look at maybe side chains or something like with RGB? I believe there's liquid stats on there already, right? Like, what's kind of that litmus test that you go through in order to say, you know what, this is important to be on my dashboard?
Yeah, the liquid one's a good point. So I'm running a liquid node and scanning that chain. That was a moderate amount of work to get set up, and I only have 4 data points on the dashboard for liquid. RGB, these other ones, I don't know. Maybe it's I kind of feel like Lightning and Liquid are the main layer 2 solutions out there, so I want to represent those. I don't hear anybody else talking about anything else.
No.
So that's kind of the threshold. I got to be interested in it, and it's got to be like stuff that people are talking about that I need to. Oh, hey, let me go find out about that before I'll like bake it into the dashboard, really.
And you've got op return in there, right, as well, right? You're doing some measurement there and trying to show a little bit of that up, right?
I've got the op return data commitment, which is the main criticism of op return is like, oh, you can't be just storing all your data in the blockchain. Well, I've got, how much it actually is it? It's 2.5 gigabytes right now. Okay, so that's a lot, but not a lot, right?
It's not the end of the world. I definitely believe that one day we'll get to where it could be potentially an issue that some people start cutting that out, and that maybe it becomes a little bit more sparse. But it ultimately, it's not the end of the world to keep a couple gigs around when you're talking about 300, 400 gigs, right? At this point,
right.
One of the things that we I guess we've tried to use this as an office, and we put up a lot of stuff like Mempool. Talking about Mempool, we did an interview with Wiz and Simon over there. We have it up in the office. We also use it in our Twitch stream and some other different places where we can. But with your dashboard, like, you have to understand some of the context, because there's no charts or graphs or any of that stuff, right? What's the decision behind, like, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit. You just want like one dashboard to look at. You kind of understand the scope of where those numbers are and the context of those numbers. What about putting charts? Have you thought about that kind of stuff? How have you, I'm sure you have, by the way, but like, how have you decided that isn't important, or that historical reference isn't as important to show?
It's a lot of work to build charts.
Yeah.
There's a million things. I've built charts like 5 different times in my Bitcoin career alone. There's a lot of things that you have to decide on. A lot of this data is ephemeral, and I'm not logging it. For instance, my mempool sizes and stuff. So then you couldn't launch day one with the historical record of a lot of these things. And I don't know, it makes the UI a lot more complex. It would take a lot of time to do. And I think it's a lot more elegant just to say there's no charts.
It is beautiful.
It's a narrowing of scope. It's a moment in time, right? The dashboard is a moment in time, and then it's gone. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm building lots of charts elsewhere. I also run. If you click through to my main page, I've got a tickers product where I show a dozen markets on one chart.
I was about to bring that up. I think that's like a relatively unknown product that you have also built is the slash tickers product.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. What all is that showing compared to what you have on your dashboard?
So it's just price and volume. It's also got futures instruments and things. It really, it really helped me to visualize the premium that was being commanded at like Korean and Chinese exchanges back in 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
You could put, you know, Kraken, Coinbase, Bitstamp, Gemini, and they'd all be in this band, and then there'd be a couple $100 gap, and that's where the Chinese effective, you know, USD effective price of Bitcoin was up here. You can also visualize the futures contracts that way. Oh, there's a, you know, 2% premium for the quarterly futures or whatever. And then you can also see how closely all the markets move in lockstep when there's big moves. And then you can also see if any market is leading or lagging. Bitfinex had a premium for a while when people were concerned about solvency, because you can buy Bitcoin and send that out, but maybe the wire transfers are blocked. So Bitcoin, you know, Bitfinex had a $150 premium or something like that. So yeah, just putting it all on one chart. There's no candles. It's just all the raw ticking, you know, tick trades. And it's 6 hours look back, and that's it. Another limited scope thing. But it, you know, you can glance at that and see if the markets are moving or they're not. One really interesting thing was a while back when Bitstamp, someone executed a huge order on Bitstamp, and it took a long time. It took like 6 minutes for their engine to execute the order. And so Bitstamp started heading down, and the BitMEX index that they use to settle and liquidate their contracts has Bitstamp as a component without outlier rejection. And so Bitstamp's slow matching engine is churning out trades rather slowly for this large order, and it's pulling the BitMEX index down, which is triggering liquidations, which is causing all the other markets to move as well. Instead of just Bitstamp going, you know, blipping down really fast and popping straight back up, it just starts dragging the whole market down. And I caught that on my tickers site, where there's this unbroken stream of Bitstamp trades, and you can see everything else like kind of moving toward it, but kind of bouncing back because they weren't tied into that basically locked state of executing one huge order. So that was a really interesting thing to see on that ticker site, was the interplay between those markets. Kind of if you could see what was going on behind the scenes, it was very cool.
Very nice. Looks like we're going to have to add another dashboard TV somewhere on here for that. I think that's a really interesting observation that you got to make as well out of that. I do like these kind of short, me personally, I have a background in analytics and all this charting and whatever, a little bit similar. And I absolutely love watching some of that stuff unfold in real time. We're actually, one of the things that we're going to be releasing here probably before this actually goes out is going to be a new dashboard for our Twitch stream that I'm really excited about putting together. And it's a hodgepodge of a bunch of different charts and stuff, but maybe I'll have to look at getting that on there, because I think that would be a lot of fun to have streaming and getting people looking at. What other kind of projects have inspired you maybe in the past? Maybe not Bitcoin related, right? But like, where do you kind of look for, you know, ideas in maybe different ways to surface information or the design of this? I'm assuming this is a one-man shop and you're not hiring a professional design shop to put all this together, right? You know, what else gets you excited, or maybe even other projects in the Bitcoin space that you're influenced by or you respect a good bit?
In the Bitcoin space, I love what's happening with wallets. I think wallets have always been a glaringly weak cornerstone of the industry, which kind of highlights the speculative nature of Bitcoin, that the exchanges are much, much more developed than the wallet space. But there's lots of cool stuff happening with wallets backed by your own node. Samurai Dojo hops out immediately, but there are others that, you know, that's something I need to investigate more is checking out all these different wallets. Um, and then anybody doing stuff with Bitcoin scripts, anything,
Mm-hmm.
any of the kind of Bitcoin native contracts, I'm really impressed with. I really want to get into DLCs, discrete log contracts as well.
I was
I
about
think
to mention that.
it'd be cool to run a DLC Oracle off of the dashboard data, right? Um, but if anybody wants to partner with me, let me know.
Have to reach out to the SureBits guys. I'm sure that they would love to have something on there. I think we did an in-house pool with the election and using the Oracle from the SureBits guys,
Nice.
and it was just top to bottom. I mean, it was just so cool. And we actually did a technical Tuesday about it, and we've done we had like probably about a 3-week span where we released a lot of content around DLCs in general. So I'm a huge fan, and I think that to me is like, oh man, the momentum there, the momentum on side chains, the momentum with Lightning, and especially like Lightning Pool, right? Like
Lightning
these are the
Pool, also
things.
very cool.
And I think Lightning Pool will drive a lot more revenue back into wallet creators as well as they're trying to look for different monetization strategies. So I think that's going to be hopefully a really big narrative in 21, especially like if we can. It looks like we're going to get through this whole Taproot kind of migration pretty easily and unscathed. It's not going to take 2.5, 3 years, so that seems like a really good thing. I was kind of nervous there for a little bit, and we can just move on to gambling and oracles and lightning, and it's going to be so great, right?
Yeah, all the elliptic curve math really lets you do cool stuff in a lot simpler ways.
What about opportunities for people to contribute or collaborate with you in some way on it? I don't believe that the code is open source or anything like that, but you do have like words, right? Maybe translations or something like that. If you ever want to internationalize, have you ever thought about opening that up? Or even if it's not opened up, is there ways people might be able to help contribute somehow?
So maybe not on the dashboard at this point, but I used to run a street price website where I was scraping the trades from the local Bitcoins and other kind of cash for Bitcoin peer-to-peer type coordinators, and I'd love to relaunch a Bitcoin street price product, fully open source, and maybe build it in Rust. But have just it's an API first kind of thing, so that wallets and other websites could integrate it really easily. And then maybe it's got a website that's very simple, like no chart at first. It's just a big ticker, and maybe beyond ticker and calculator, and then beyond that, maybe some charts at some point. But yeah, this idea of the street price of Bitcoin is really interesting, and highlighting that premium has been interesting for me, especially if you can highlight that premium in another country. So you've got the official exchange rate of the country, and then you've got the street value of Bitcoin, which acts as this like true value for their fiat currency. So you kind of have the two things. You have the peer-to-peer premium, and you have the currency premium over their officially published exchange rate. But you could highlight instances where a foreign currency is diverging from its official rate, and you can use Bitcoin to highlight that difference. So that's been interesting to me for a while.
Yeah, and we've seen a little bit of that here too recently, I believe. So I've been watching like I we got people that we work with down in like Argentina, for instance, right? Some developers down there. Everything's crazy, right? They're telling me every day about something new as far as that divergence or new rules or what's going on in that street market. It is a very real thing that they are trying to work on. Like we have obviously like a local Bitcoins, or we have a BISC or something like that maybe we use here. But there are real on the ground street markets for a lot of these things. They're going on. Turkey, especially when you're seeing all these pop to all-time highs. Right? I think there was, of course, we're all at this point we're at all-time highs pretty much around the board for any currency. But first it was Brazil, Turkey, Argentina, and Venezuela that really hit super hard, and I can only imagine how difficult it is in all of those places because none of them are the best countries in the world to probably be operating Bitcoin nodes or owning Bitcoin in at this point. All right. Last but not least, I know you've written some pieces of content in the past, and I'm curious, when are we going to see you on Bitcoin Magazine for an op-ed here soon? Or do you have any ambitions of writing some more content about some of the stuff that you talked about today?
It's funny. So I did write a piece for the 10th anniversary of the first Mt. Gox trade because that was just like a data point that stuck in my brain from looking at that data for so long. Was like, oh, it was like around July of 2010 or whatever. It's funny because it takes me so long to write prose, and not as long to write code. And so I've got a little bit of content out there, but in the content game, as you're well aware, you have to keep publishing. You have to keep going. The code game, like the dashboard is running, right? And it's been running for, I say a week without me doing anything to the server side. So it's kind of like a multiplier effect, right? That being said, I would love to write a couple more articles about the Bitcoin in space stuff. Yeah. I have one article so far.
We've gone through some heated battles about how viable that is. In fact, for Bitcoin 2020 for the conference, we were trying to put together a big panel, and we had some really interesting space people to come on that. But Colin, who used to write with us, is very anti-space and was waiting to write an article about how it would never work. But I'm curious, what would it work? Like, what's the gist of what you would write? We'll practice this way.
So I wrote one article already called Bitcoin and the Interplanetary Frontier, and it addresses the moon and Mars, basically. And it's mainly about using Bitcoin, not about mining. Just about using kind of the raw light time delay. So if you're on Mars, you wait 4 extra blocks or something. And that's it. So you need the bandwidth, obviously, to get the signal, the blockchain, the blocks up, from Earth to Mars. But other than that, you just need a little bit longer confirmation times. And so same thing all the way out to Pluto or whatever. You just need a lot more confirmations to know that your transaction is in the chain. But Lightning Network works locally. So you could have instant Lightning transactions, and as long as you adjust your penalty timeouts to account for the speed of light, then Lightning is pretty much unchanged user experience anywhere that you're transacting with people that are close to you in terms of the speed of light. So that was a very interesting conclusion that I came to. What else was in that paper? I think things I want to address are like data, trade, like sending goods back and forth, and then the money is a data transmission, but the trade is like physical goods, and then things like protecting your data sources, always having multiple paths of multiple antennas and things like that, and how using Bitcoin would incentivize people to create all these alternate data paths and pay for data, because it's the economic lifeblood of the society is coming through these data relay channels. So then there's, of course, like, when does it make sense to launch a new chain? What's the block signs of that chain? I know Drew just came out with a recent article, and I was also thinking of like a long period chain, just like he had, where it's like you have blocks that come out every day or every week or something. That's a much, much, much slower chain, but its scope of settlement is so much bigger as far as the kind of the sphere that it can operate under. So it's kind of a similar conclusion. Obviously, his is much more fleshed out because he actually wrote an article and I didn't. So
Well, that's all right. I mean, look, you're basically claiming that not only is Bitcoin going to be the buyer of last resort for all energy in the world, but we're also going to be responsible for data transmission speeds intergalactically. Like, I'm all in for this type of stuff,
yeah,
right? Like, if Bitcoin is the reason for all of these technological developments, I think that's a pretty cool thing. And obviously, it's people want to do commerce, right? And I'm especially excited to see how a colonization of, let's say, colonization of even the moon, right, in some way, would dramatically affect us, because it is close enough, right, that you don't have to make. I believe it's close enough that you don't have to make super large considerations for the moon people. The Mars people were different, right? But
Mhm.
like with the moon, no, you just got a lot of really interesting solar energy sitting out there, just ready to be used, right?
It's like 2.5 light seconds away. So that's negligible for Bitcoin. It'd be pretty bad for video calls, but you just have to
Yeah.
adjust. Um, yeah, the other piece is interplanetary or interstellar exploration. So you send off a giant colony ship. They're gonna need money on the ship or whatever. So do they fork Bitcoin? Do they have a side chain that's tied to this higher level currency? Do they jumpstart a brand new currency and markets kind of trade for that one? But as they get farther and farther away, you can't really have quick round trips because they're light years away. So I don't know. That's a
I mean,
problem I haven't really tackled yet.
but that's an interesting one. I mean, if a fork of Bitcoin, a pure clean fork of Bitcoin, just started over again on a spaceship, would it compete against Bitcoin itself, to the effect that the network effects of that chain would have a similar impact as what we have here on Earth, right? Without competing, right? And that's I bet it could happen. But you could
Yeah,
form your own group there.
I guess it would have. You got the hash power issue. So yeah, you have this like the whole civilization is in a ship for 1,000 years or something. It's a different. I think there's a different political atmosphere that has to exist. So you know, it yeah, yeah. You've got like a bottle economy. There's no like growth because it's all like bottled up. So maybe you have different considerations for the money, like while they're in route or whatever. But I don't know.
Well,
Space is
I'm
tough.
fascinated. I want to see that. So I'm going to push
Yeah.
you. Look, I'm going to push you to write something down. I know that people would be enjoying that, and then you look, publish it on Bitcoin Magazine if you want. I'll tell everybody about it. It'll be great.
2 weeks,
2
Christmas, right?
weeks. Where can more people find out more about the dashboard or your wonderful intergalactic writings?
Bitcoin.clarkmoody.com. It's all there.
That's a nice URL, man. All right. Thanks, Clark. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.